All right, in this video we are going to work on sketching angles in the coordinate plane. So for starters, the variable we're going to use in this lesson, for all the trig lessons, instead of the variable x, we're going to use the variable theta. So that's what the variable looks like. That's how the variable is spelled. So instead of an x, we're going to use that symbol theta to represent angle measures. All these angles have two parts. There's an initial side and a terminal side. So if you talk about any angle right here, so let's just make up an angle here. The initial side is always going to be the x-axis, because we're going to be graphing these in the coordinate plane. And the ending side is called the terminal side. Angle degree is positive when there is a counterclockwise rotation, and negative when there's a clockwise rotation. And then a couple more definitions to go through: coterminal angles and reference angles. There's actually more about reference angles we're going to talk about here in just a second. But coterminal just means two angles that have the same terminal side. They start at the same place and they end at the same place, but they come from opposite directions. Reference angles are the shortest degree of rotation to the x-axis. And a few more things, pause the video if you need to, a few more things about reference angles, and then we're going to actually look at some examples. What reference angles are: they are angles formed with the x-axis always. Reference angles are always acute, meaning they are less than 90 degrees, and they're always positive. You cannot have a negative reference angle. These are going to be really useful when we start talking more about the unit circle. But for right now, there's just a vocab word. You need to know everything, all three of these things about reference angles. So let's sketch just a couple examples. Let's start by sketching the angle, let's say 140 degrees in the coordinate plane. So when we sketch an angle in the coordinate plane, we're always going to start with the initial side is always going to be the positive x-axis. That's how we're always going to start. And then we want to go 140 degrees, and since it's a positive angle measure, we're going to go counterclockwise. Or another way to think about it is from the positive x-axis, we're going to start by going up. This much, of course, is 90. So we need to go 50 more degrees, which is about halfway in between quadrant 2 there. So this piece is 90. This piece is roughly 50. Altogether, that is a 140 degree angle measure. So that's how you sketch an angle in the coordinate plane. And then here we're going to sketch the coterminal angle. So again, coterminal means it starts and ends in the same place, but it rotates in a different direction. So that means since 140 degrees was a counterclockwise rotation, the coterminal angle we're going to go clockwise. And let's do this in a different color, but we're going to start here in the same place. Coterminal is just going to be coming from the opposite direction there. So then the question, what is the measure of that angle that we just marked off in green? Well, we know it's going to be a negative angle since we're going clockwise. And then we know a full circle is 360 degrees. So if this piece is 140, then that means the leftover piece is 360 minus 140, which is 220. But again, we know it's a negative angle measure since we're going clockwise. So the coterminal angle for this problem is negative 220. And basically the absolute value of these two angle measures will always add up to 360. All right, now let's do a clockwise rotation. So we're going to sketch the angle negative 50 degrees. So again, the angle starts in the same place, the positive x-axis. And this time we're going to go clockwise since it's a negative angle measure. So basically that's a little over halfway through quadrant number 4. There's 90 degrees in quadrant 4. So we're going a little bit over halfway. And now we're going to sketch the coterminal angle to negative 50. So again, that's going to be an angle coming from the opposite direction. That starts and ends in the same place as negative 50. But again, it's just coming counterclockwise instead of clockwise. So it's going to be a positive angle measure. You don't really have to put the plus sign there. To figure out that angle measure, we're going to take 360, the full circle, subtract the original angle. So that means the coterminal angle of this problem is positive 310 degrees. So let's do two more here in the back page. We've already talked about coterminal angles, so I'm going to mark that part out of the directions here. We're going to sketch the given angle and then identify the reference angle for each one of these problems. So start by sketching 40 degrees. That's going to be in quadrant number 1, and it's almost halfway through quadrant number 1. Then up here across the top, I'm just put some reminders about what a reference angle is. It's the shortest, really it's the shortest angle measure. Sometimes I like to say distance just because that's a little bit easier to see when we talk about distance, but it's the shortest angle measure to the x-axis. It's positive and it's acute. So this kind of is a pretty easy one actually, but it's almost tricky. It's so easy. 40 degrees is the original angle. So then you have to ask yourself, so from the terminal side of that angle, what's the shortest distance to the x-axis? Well, the answer to that is this angle measure right here. That's the shortest distance to the x-axis. You wouldn't say this arrow in green because that's the shortest distance to the y-axis. So the shortest distance to the x-axis is 40 degrees. That angle measure is positive and it's less than 90 degrees. So our reference angle in this problem is 40 degrees. Again, we're not doing coterminal, but I'll go ahead and write it. Coterminal angle would be negative 320. All right, and then this last one that I'll have you try C and D. We're going to sketch this angle, negative 120. So we're going to go clockwise, that's negative 90. And then we're going to go an additional 30 degrees, so it's going to take us into quadrant number 3. So this angle measure is negative 120. Sometimes I like to write the individual pieces. Like this piece is negative 90. This piece is negative 30. That's going to help us with the reference angle. The reference angle is the shortest distance to the x-axis from the terminal side. So here's the terminal side. Think to yourself, okay, what's the shortest distance or the shortest angle measure to the x-axis? And it's this piece right here. And that angle measure, of course, some of you may be saying that's negative 60 degrees since we're going clockwise. But remember, reference angles, we always write as positive. So the reference angle in this problem is 60. The coterminal angle, if you're keeping score at home, is positive 240. So pause the video, try part C and D. Focus mainly on the reference angle. If you want to try coterminal as well, that'll be on the next quiz. I encourage you to try that as well. And then the coterminal angle would just be negative. And then 360 minus 205. So the coterminal angle is negative 155. And this last one, again, just a rough sketch of negative 20. Negative 20, its reference angle, shortest distance to the x-axis, would be positive 20 degrees. I mean, reference angle is always positive. And the coterminal angle in this case is going to be positive 340.